think I want to steer the rest of this conversation towards media and your YouTube channel and social media. And the way I'm going to preface this topic is so we're the climbing majority, right? And you're kind of you've got like a foot in both camps. You're like a recreational climber, you're part of the majority, but you also are kind of like starting to go into this world of sponsorship. And you have a YouTube channel, and so you also kind of have a foot in the door as an influencer. Like, how do you, I guess, like, I'm going to try to branch this out a little bit. So like the difference between an influencer and an athlete today, like being a sponsored person, I feel like a lot of people feel like you have to be both. You have to have an audience, you have to have a personality, you have to have a platform to be seen as an athlete, unless you're like top of the line and it doesn't really matter. And then they just send crews out to film you anyway. So like, what are your thoughts on the differences between athletes and influencers, and kind of where do you see yourself in this kind of jumbled hodgepodge of your YouTube channel, your sponsorships, your passion as a climber?
Sure. Yeah. I think whenever I hear the word influencer, I really cringe. I really like avoid wanting to be titled as such a thing.
I feel influenced by you, Tyler.
Dang, bummer. But I fully understand that I am to some degree. It's like I put content on the internet, and people are influenced by that content. So objectively, that is the definition of an influencer. And because I have sponsorships, and I am an influencer. However, I try really hard to avoid selling product and advertising product on my social media. And I have like really, I get people reach out to me and say like, oh, okay, I'll go give you this for free if you do this or whatever. And or certain companies. And I've made it super clear with all the companies that I work with that I really want to avoid being an influencer and promoting product in that way.
Can we unpack that a little bit? So like what is it in particular about that? Let's just take this first. So let's say it's a product you genuinely love, use, believe in, and you think it's rad. And you are then like promoting that product. What is like your ethical barrier? What about it don't you like? And I don't have like foot in the door. I'm just curious to what you're like, why you feel the way. I just want to unpack that feeling.
Great question. So like that sort of thing, if there's a product that I use a lot and I'm like, this is awesome and I fully support it, I have no issue promoting that product. It's like I don't have an aspiration to be the person trying to sell people on stuff. If there's a really, really awesome product that I love, and a sponsor of mine's like, hey, can you give a call out or shout out to this product? Like, I have no problem doing that. And when I was down in Torres del Paine, Patagonia sponsored that trip, and I think I made a post like, hey, like, want to thank Patagonia and like want to call out like, me being psyched on all their gear. I genuinely believe that Patagonia makes the best alpine climbing gear out there, and like I did it in kind of my way, where I like had an entire post just dedicated to that. But the idea of like, I don't know, like slyly putting hashtags and like trying to influence people like consistently through every post, that's just not quite my scene. And I'm not particularly interested in that. And yeah, unpacking it further, it's like I don't necessarily like the path of being a professional climber and selling products and posting about products to make a living. That doesn't interest me. And it's not something that I want. And I don't know. I don't have like, I can't really necessarily articulate why that's not something I want, but I definitely know it's not something I want. However, like I really, really enjoy the process of working with Patagonia to develop new products and to help them market new products, particularly with content, by giving them content, and that's something that aligns with my interests. So I don't know, it's complicated, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I stand on a lot of these subjects. It's kind of a new world for me to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just sounds like you just want it to be like genuine or organic, not like, oh, we need you to promote this product that you don't use or believe in today. And you're like, oh, hey, I'm Tyler Karow. You should use this like headlamp or blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. It's like, yeah, like I think that's like totally fair.
Sponsored by
Yeah,
Clorox.
I was gonna say like
Yeah.
free piece of advice. I'll take a manager's cut, but you guys clearly need to get sponsored by like Marlboro, red wine, and mini Dutch
Yeah,
ovens.
exactly.
Yeah, well,
Then
actually,
you're sold, dude. You're good. Maybe a pizza, like Aunt Jemima, toss that in there. Like,
we actually did, or Ema and Cedar did kind of get like wine hooked up. This dude, I was at this like Hardly Strictly, this bluegrass festival in San Francisco, and this guy came up to me. He's like, "Yo, dude, like, I want to like hook you guys up with wine." And I've been to this winery, and Ema and Cedar have been to this winery, and they've given us a bunch of free wine. It's really cool. So that's, I don't know, but that's
awesome.
like
Hell yeah.
cool situation.
If wine was a huge part of my life in the climbing world and I had a way to get it for free, I would probably pursue that.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's like good wine. It's like ethically. It's like I don't know. It's sourced well. It's Bedrock Wines.
Hell yeah.
Check them
That's
out.
awesome.
Yeah, there you go. There's a call out.
There's the plug. There's a plug. We're gonna need to see a check for that. On the note of like actual content creation, so one thing that struck me interesting that you said was that and you can correct me if I'm wrong in assuming this, it seemed like you were prideful of your lack of investment in production quality.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So as a professional video producer and photographer, like that like stabs my heart a little bit. So like how do you view documentaries like Free Solo and Don Wall, like professional documentaries that like capture the essence of climbing in a very cinematic way? Like, do you look down on them, or is it just something that you're personally not interested in creating?
I definitely don't look down upon them. I've watched Free Solo and I've watched the Dawn Wall, and I've thought to myself, wow, those are incredible films and they're beautifully made. And the people that filmed them, edited them, produced them, directed them, etc., like those are artists, and that's like really badass. And people who are putting out content that's fine-tuned and edited, I have a lot of respect for those people. And I have a lot of respect for them because because I enjoy the content, but also because I know I do not have the skills to do those things. And I've tried to some degree to do them in the past. The reason why I take some pride, I guess, in my like, I think my YouTube channel and the content that I produce is just a totally different style. It's just like a very raw, uncut, unedited style, and I take pride in that because I guess to some degree, like, I don't know, it's just I enjoy making those videos. It's been like very fun for me to make those videos, and um, the pride stems from the fact that people actually like them, which I was
for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're wildly successful. You can't take that away from you at all. And I enjoyed watching the film itself. So I think that a lot of that speaks to, I mean, what you're actually doing. Like, you are doing something absolutely remarkable and something that someone has no idea like what it's about. And so like the story really pulls it all together and you're capturing like something different.
totally. It's like I would agree. It's the reason why people like it is because it's more about the actual. It's more about the actual content, or like, maybe let me rephrase that. Not the content. It's more about the endeavor than it is about the content or the aesthetics of the film. And yeah, I think like a lot of times people watch these finely edited climbing videos, and they actually don't understand. They're like, wow, it's really cool, but like you don't really understand what's going on in the actual climb. Or oftentimes, I mean, you asked if I look down upon these films at all, and I generally don't, but there certainly are films that I'm like, wait a second, that's like they're climbing on the wrong mountain. That's not an accurate depiction of what's going on. For example, the Line Across the Sky that like I've seen that movie a bunch of times. It's the Tommy and Alex doing the Fitztraverse. it's just so cool and so inspiring. But if you actually spend time down in Patagonia, you're like, what the fuck? That's not the Fitztraverse. Like they're like climbing on they're like approaching the Torre Valley, and they're like climbing on Raphael. A bunch of those scenes were filmed after they did the actual
Wow.
Fitztraverse.
Interesting.
And I think that's lame, to some degree.
Yeah, I'd agree with
But
that.
whatever. I mean, it's like that's the film
There
industry.
is there is a lot of trickery involved in shooting films. Like a lot of, like, the biggest thing I always wondered in the very beginning of my career was like, how are you getting a shot of someone climbing, putting their hand on a hold, and then you zoom out to the drone shot of them in the exact same place and there's no one on the wall? I'm like, how the fuck is that possible? And
Yeah.
what they do is they literally climb the same route, even if it's this huge, crazy 13D multi-pitch. The climbers wrap back down and then climb the pitch again for the second camera to get the other shot.
Yeah.
And so
So
like it becomes a production rather than like an experience, a climbing experience.
and I should clarify, I am guilty of that as well. I mean, there's this one instance where when I climbed Golden Gate with Amity Warm, we had this amazing experience on the wall, and none of it was photographed, or there was no like content produced other than with my little GoPro and our iPhones. And when we got down, I mean, we both recognized that this is a pretty significant achievement, for both of our climbing careers. And Amity on the way down, we had run into this photographer named Felipe Nordenfletch, and he was friends with Amity. And the next day, Amity's like, let's let's hike up today and like go take photos on the upper pitches. And I was like, fuck no, like absolutely not. I was not interested. And eventually, she convinced me to we delayed it a day. I had like we literally got off the wall, got down, had one rest day, and then hiked up the next day. And I was still so worked. And yeah, we went up there and fixed lines from the top of Golden Gate, wrapped into the route, and shot a bunch of photos on the Golden Desert and on the H5 Traverse and on the Razor Blades pitches, three of the upper pitches on the route. It was all completely staged. I got some really sick photos. They look really
Hmm.
cool, and I'm grateful for those photos. And it's kind of fun. Like I wasn't wearing a helmet. I always climb with a helmet, and I like wasn't wearing a helmet for these photos. And I feel like I'm kind of bummed out that I did that to some degree. I'm like, man, this is encouraging people to do. I think people should wear a helmet when they climb.
Yeah,
At least
For
when they
sure. We've talked about this on the podcast where you literally you're taking your helmet off for the picture.
Yeah, and it's kind of lame. It's like, but I don't know. At the time, I just I this is a few years ago. This is like my first kind of big climbing achievement, and I actually remember we were hiking up, and Alex Honnold was hiking down from El Cap, and we ran into him right at the top of the fixed lines, and I had Jumar'd the fixed lines first, and he was waiting for Sonny and a bunch of other people to like hike down. They had Honnold had like gone up there to like deliver some people pizza, and I ended up just hanging out with him for like 30 minutes. And I remember asking him, I was like, "Hey, like, what's your opinion on doing these sorts of staged situations, specifically if you're not getting paid, or like, what's the deal? Like, how do you feel about this?" And he gave me some interesting advice. He's like, the first time you do it, it's super cool and rad, and like you should totally do it. And then after the first time, it like you should get paid, or treat it like work, or I don't know. It's and I that the opportunity hasn't really come up for me again. I haven't really done like cool enough stuff to warrant some photographer being like, "Hey, you should repeat that and get cool photos." But I'm not particularly interested in like restaging climbs for photos. I feel like if someone wants to take a photo of me mid climb while I'm doing it, that's cool. But um, yeah, I feel like it's cooler to document the experience during the experience.
What about social media specifically? It seems like you have expressed some concerns about the medium of content. Maybe dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I feel like like many people in this world, like I have a complicated relationship with social media. I don't particularly love it, but I certainly use it. and I certainly benefit from it. There's a lot of pros and cons to social media, and um, it's interesting. I feel like my current place with social media, I feel like I use it as my public journal, which is kind of fun. I like to write long form posts, long form, essentially just rambles of how I feel about certain topics or certain climbs. Um, and that's been really fun. But I also find it very. I find it to be a huge time suck. Um, and I think that's really dangerous. I actually don't have Instagram on my phone. I just only use it on my computer. And I will, if I post something, I'll re-download it on my phone for like the post and then immediately delete it again. So it forces me, if I like really need to like check out Instagram on my phone, I'll go on the internet browser, which is like, it sucks enough to the point where you're not motivated to like scroll aimlessly. So I think that's like a healthy way for me to manage social media. But I also think it's a dangerous thing, because it's this like tool to compare ourselves to others, and it's a tool to feel left out from certain situations. And I remember when Snapchat came out, or when Snapchat got popular when I was in college, and I remember going to concerts and like suddenly seeing all these people pull out their phones, um, and
Just
start.
looking at a sea of cameras.
God,
Yeah,
Nobody's
I
like
hate
even
that. I hate
nobody's
that
even
so much.
living and enjoying the music.
totally. I mean, do you
Yeah, I
remember
see
going
that
to
all
a concert in like 2011? Like no one took out their freaking phone, but like suddenly 2013 came and everyone's phone is out. And you go to a concert now, I mean, depending on the concert or a party or whatever, everyone's phone is out and they're trying to document it. And it's like, why can't you just get that video from your friend? Or like
And
what? And
also, no one is gonna want to see that on social media.
yeah, but
No one gives a fuck.
but like quickly recognize, it's like suddenly it's like, oh, I want to post this on Snapchat because like then like, oh, I'm with like the cool kids, or I'm like at this cool event, and like I can be cool if I post this and let everyone know where I'm at, or like what I'm doing or who I'm with. And I found that to be super lame, and not something that I support. And so when Instagram stories came out, I immediately was like, I'm not participating in this. This is essentially Instagram's version to be competitive with Snapchat in that realm. That's how I saw it. And so I've never really engaged with Instagram stories. And I do see value in Instagram stories now to some degree, and I have used them particularly when promoting events, or if there's like some short-term thing. It's like, oh, I'm looking for a ride here, or I'm looking for a housing situation, or i'm looking I'm hosting this event, come sign up or buy tickets to this thing. I definitely do use Instagram stories now occasionally, but I really avoid using Instagram stories as a form of like showcasing what I'm doing on a regular basis, because I really don't like the culture of essentially do like showing people what you're doing on a daily basis and bragging about the cool things you're doing. And that's hypocritical, because Instagram as a platform is essentially that. I'm just like, cool, I'm not going to do the short form. I'm going to do the long form. And I'm just going to like wait a couple more days or weeks and then like write a longer post about it. And I don't know why, but that makes me feel happier or better. And I could justify it a little bit more. So that's my form of engagement in social media. But I definitely shy away from that like Snapchatty stuff. I don't know. Maybe the Snapchat just like gave me a bad vibe in college, and then I ran away from Instagram stories. But I don't know. I still watch other people's Instagram stories, and I'm like, that's really cool. And it's like fun to see what your friends are doing. And I don't want to like shit on it too much. I feel like I'm shitting on a lot of things in this podcast. Um, so I'm not like too cynical, but yeah, I think social media it's complicated. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I think that everybody has their own relationship with it, and I think that as long as you're expressing yourself in a genuine way and it's not like affecting you too much in a negative way, it just depends. It's personal for each person. I definitely struggle with the type of content where it's like the templatey stuff where everybody's just posting the same stupid song and doing some stupid dance, or like there's nothing valuable there. Like if you're going to take the time to post to try to make something valuable and teach a lesson or something, or share something that's personal. Anyways, climbing specifically, and maybe this is related to social media, but where do you feel like our community is struggling?
Yeah. That's a cool question. I would say that one one thing that just immediately came to my mind is inclusivity. I think particularly big wall alpine climbing and climbing on El Cap is like one of the whitest, malest types of climbing of all time. Um, and it's I mean, I'm a white dude, so I'm and I enjoy that type of climbing, and almost all my partners are white dudes, or like white women. And I think that it wasn't ever something on my mind when I started climbing, but as I've climbed more and more and more, I've like recognized that it's pretty cool to have diversity within climbing, and it's pretty cool to make different spaces within climbing feel welcome to different types of people. Um, and so I think there could be a lot of progress made. I would like to see LCAT become less white. I think it's like the whitest crag in the world. So that's one thing where I think there could be some progress made. I think there's a lot of advantages to having a diverse climbing body, and I also recognize that there's a lot of hurdles to that. And ultimately, when you don't have many role models to look up to, like big wall climbing and big wall alpine climbing is very prohibitive. It's very cost prohibitive. It's very time prohibitive. You have to have money, you have to have time, and you have to have access to these places that are typically far away from urban environments. And so it's not particularly conducive to a diverse mix of humans participating. But yeah, I think that's slowly changing, and I encourage that to I hope it changes. And I'm not doing too much, but I've helped participated in like the Yosemite United event, cooked for like 150 people last Yosemite United, which is a pretty cool event that kind of tries to make a difference in that realm. And yeah, that's one thing that I think would be pretty cool if it changed. And kind of I don't necessarily would I don't know if it would be considered a problem, but just yeah, something that I would hope to change.
Do you view like the financial aspect of that as like the greatest barrier, or do you think there's like cultural choice going on in there? Like, what do you view as like the barrier for that? Because like hypothetically, like playing devil's advocate, you could be like, well, you could get like a sport draw and share a trad rack with a friend and live like a total greaseball dirt bag for like sub, $1,000, and you could get into climbing. So like in relatively like compared to football or hockey or lots of other sports, or like buying brand new basketball shoes all throughout like a high school career or something, other sports where you do actually see like not necessarily a greater diversity of ideas, but a diversity of people, if that makes sense, like as far as like the racial aspect of that goes. So I'm just wondering, like in the devil's advocate there, like what do you think is the barrier there for these people?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely not only the money, and I also very much agree with you in that there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I'm not going to get into trad climbing or big wall climbing or whatever because it's like a huge financial hurdle." And I and a lot of people are also like, "Oh, I'm not going to travel internationally for climbing because I think it's a huge financial hurdle." But there's always ways. I mean, the dirtbag ways are they're they're real, and you can climb for very, very cheap, and you can borrow lots of gear, and you can travel for very, very cheap. And it's funny, it's like I've traveled a lot around the world, and I've traveled for very like less than what people pay in rent in many cities per month. So I don't think that's necessarily a good excuse. Yet a lot of people don't know how to travel that way, and a lot of people don't know how to acquire gear and live in those ways. That knowledge is not readily available and accessible to people. And a lot of people will just, if you're just trying to get into climbing or you don't really know much about it, you look on the internet and you say, "Oh, cool, cam. Like, what is that? It's a $80, $100. I need how many of those to climb El Cap? I like that's a lot of money." They don't recognize that. Oh, maybe if I get super psyched on climbing and just start really small and buy something used on Mountain Project and then go booty a bunch of gear in Joshua Tree, like I could eventually acquire a large trad rack and borrow a portal edge and make it work for very little money. I think it's like that's not obvious to a lot of people, but I'd say the primary reason why that type of climbing is not very diverse is the more the role model component. There's just
Yeah.
not a
Okay.
lot of I mean, if you're a black dude or black women and you're like choosing the activities you want to do, um, it's more it's unlikely that you would choose an activity that's historically done by a bunch of white dudes. Um, and having role models is really important. And there's a lot of really rad organizations and people that are kind of stepping up and doing that. And I think that's really cool. But I think until there's, a consistent group of, diverse climbers that are getting into that realm, it's going to be sparse.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair. Like we interviewed Eddie Taylor. I'm guessing you know who he is, right? Like, and that was kind
Yeah,
of essentially
totally.
what he was talking about. Like his main point was like, like it is that like viewpoint of like if you don't see the people representing yourself in the sport, then the people aren't likely to gravitate to it. And I think that's a fair argument. I just like to bring up the devil's advocate that like there are other factors like cultural choice and stuff that are like going into those decisions because like you alluded to, you can't actually do it for cheap. So I just wanted to understand your point of view there, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Eddie. And it's like there's always exceptions, and there's always ways to go about things and do things. You could totally get into it, and if you're motivated and like there's barriers that you can cross, but just in general, there's a lot more barriers. There's a lot less barriers if you're a white dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the one thing that comes to mind when this topic is brought up is it almost, and maybe this is my personal bias on here, but it kind of feels like when we say like, oh, El Cap's like a white, it's super dominated by white climbers. It almost is like where the white climbers are kind of like keeping it that way on purpose. Like, have you experienced any sort of kind of like in like purposely not including people like this because of race? Like, have you noticed that in the community, or is it just the topic of like there's not enough role models, and where most of the people you meet would be totally open to having a diverse climbing
Yeah,
culture and
totally the
experience?
latter. I definitely
Yeah.
have not experienced like some weird gatekeeping thing. I mean, my experience is that the climbing community is quite open and welcoming, and the people among it are pretty progressive, and for the most part, and most people are like would be stoked to see LCAP more diverse. It's just that, yeah, it's really just the role model thing. That's what
Mhm.
I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That's I think a good point to say that like there aren't a whole bunch of evil white dudes on El Cap. It's like
I'm sh- I'm
there's just
sure
like
there's I'm
historical
sure they
issues, lots of stuff.
exist. Yeah, I'm sure they exist, but just for the
Exist
most part, no.
everywhere, right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think something we could steer this conversation to, which we kind of talked about like in our meet and greet, was this kind of this weird proclivity in the climbing community of just focusing on pushing grades and climbing really hard. Like we talked about this when we interviewed Jonathan Segrist. We had a very different interview with him. We weren't really interested in like training methodology or anything. Like I kind of talked to him behind the scenes. It was like, nobody fucking cares to hear how many pull-ups you can do. Cause like you've probably done a million interviews or you've talked about that. Like there's other more interesting things to talk about. But so what's really your perception there on like our community's fascination with just climbing harder?
Yeah, that's there's a lot to unpack there. And I think it's interesting historically if you go back 50 years, kind of before sport climbing got popular, climbing was really purely an adventure sport. It didn't really matter. People weren't interested in like the hardest move you can necessarily climb to some, in some respects. There's always people pushing the limits, and that was really cool. But uh, I think it was way more about the adventure. And nowadays, for a lot of reasons, I do think we climbing culture has become quite obsessed with performance. Um, and yeah, it bums me out a little bit. Um, I think I think a lot of people are opting to spend time training to get really strong rather than going and having these adventurous experiences outside. But that's cool. Everyone's entitled to spend their time how they want to spend their time. Um, and however, I do think it's like a little bit of a shame when I hear, oh man, like I spent my Saturday training in the gym, rather than climbing outside. However, at the same time, now that I'm working this really gnarly job that occupies all this time, I catch myself doing the exact same thing. So, I'm a hypocrite. And it's more efficient to train in the gym. And sometimes I'm like, oh man, I only have 2 hours. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm not going to climb outside because I could get way more done in the gym in my 2 hours of time. Or maybe I could only climb a couple pitches outside if I have to drive all the way to the crag and walk there, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, in general, I think climbers these days are very training centric. I think there's like a huge pressure to push your limit and to climb better grades and to have a project and project the shit out of something until you can send it. And I don't particularly jive with that culture. I've never really been into projecting. I think, yeah, it could be cool. I see the point to it, but for me, if I climb a route, I would rather just climb the route to the left of it next, instead of if I climb a route, I fall off. I'd rather climb the route to the left of that instead of like retrying
Trying it
the
again.
route again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How closely do you link the word adventure and risk?
I don't. I don't actually. I mean, for sure, if you say like, oh yeah, is there more risk in adventure climbing or sport climbing? For sure, there's more risk in adventure climbing. But adventure climbing could just mean it's a broad term. I really like that term adventure climbing because it's not like there's not a defined definition of what it is, unlike sport climbing or trad climbing or bouldering. Like you could go adventure climbing and that can be bouldering. And that just means, oh, maybe we're going like super far out somewhere where that doesn't get climbed very often, or we're maybe gonna go sport climbing in this like really out there setting in this location where people don't typically climb, or we're gonna do some first ascents. Like that is adventure climbing in my opinion. And there is adventure climbing that's very, very safe. And there's also adventure climbing that is very, very risky. Um, and certainly adventure climbing is typically more risky than like, going to the climbing gym. But but yeah, I don't think they're they don't necessarily need to be related.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of trying to make the connection of that if you took the general population as a whole, I would say the majority of people are risk averse
For
rather
sure.
than like putting
Totally.
themselves in risky situations. So to me, I think it makes sense that a large majority of climbers are, gym climbers or sport climbers or boulderers, because the inherent risk level, whatever that is, however you have to manage less risk in these disciplines of climbing. And so to me, they lend towards a larger group of people. But I like your point you just made, where it's like you can go bouldering and you can go sport climbing in a very controlled environment with little to no risk and still make it an adventure. And I think that is a good element to share, because I'm the same with you, Tyler. Like if I fall off a route, I'm not going to climb it again. I'm going to go to the next one to the left, because for me, climbing is about exploration. It's about new experiences. It's about figuring things out on the fly. Like, okay, like I don't want to have to rehearse something over and over again. I want to go try something new. And so like, that's where the passion is for me. And I think that there's a lot to be found in climbing for people in that way.
Totally. And I actually really like the fact that you said that, because I think adventure is all relative to the person pursuing it. And for someone who's never climbed outside before, that first day outside, whatever they're doing, climbing that like very, very safe 5-6 sport route, like that is a huge adventure. Like that is, and like no one should take that away from them. That's an adventure climb for sure. The first time I ever went climbing outside, like that was I got more adventure from that day of sport climbing than I have climbing El Cap, for the whatever dozenth time. And so yeah, it's all relative, and you can totally be safe. And like, the days where you're like, all right, I'm gonna go climb like 30 pitches of sport climb or 20 pitches of some sport zone, like that's an adventure day, and you can do that in a super safe format. And yeah, it's just, you're right, people are generally risk adverse and typically don't choose to typically don't choose to adventure climb, even though you can adventure climb in a risk free way to some degree.
Totally. I think it also has to do with like comfort. People get into their patterns and their routines, and breaking the cycle and going through personal growth is hard for some people. And I think there's an element of seeking personal growth and seeking exploration is kind of like congruent with each other, and we all find it in different ways. And doing new things in the world of climbing is one of those ways.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely think that people strive for comfort. And that's like a shame.
Yeah, it's interesting that like it's almost like effort and reward are kind of like, in tandem, like on a scale. Like the more effort or suffering you put into something, the more like rewarding and meaningful the thing usually feels, like within reason, of course. Like there's various things where obviously maybe you suffer like way beyond you want. I wouldn't call my accident like very rewarding, although it has been in very interesting ways. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like, like I don't know, some of the most miserable physical experiences I've ever had are some of the most meaningful that I feel the best, because you've challenged yourself, you've pushed yourself through barriers, you've made yourself in this very uncomfortable state, and in the end, those are the experiences that really stick with you.
Yeah, I could not agree more. You're totally right. It's like oftentimes the challenge and the struggle makes the experience even sweeter.
Kind of like steering this towards the future. You had talked about upcoming Patagonia trip. Talk to us about that. What do you have planned? What are you seeking to get out of that? Are you like, how long are you planning on diving back into your climbing career? How does that tag into your sponsorships, and bring us there?
Yeah, so I had shoulder surgery in February. I tore my labrum. I actually dislocated or subluxed my shoulder climbing on El Cap this past fall.
How'd you do that?
And I was on the nose climbing with my friend Michelle, and she was belaying me on the Lynn Hill Traverse. And typically, you'll like the way I've done it subsequently is like you get to a bolt and you yell take, and you kind of like lower down and pendulum over to the next bolt. It's like a bolt traverse, and I was just trying to go really fast, and so I actually had uh, I had a bolt clipped, and I had my rope from my tie-in point running through the bolt, and then I had my hand on the other end of the rope, and I was lowering myself off of the bolt with a ton of slack in the system, just so I could do it faster. And I lowered myself off to a big jug that I grabbed with my left hand, and then I let go of the slack, intending to match the jug. And I was like, "Cool, this will be fine." And as soon as I did that, my body just like flew backwards. Like essentially, I fell, and my left arm on the jug like caught my whole body weight, and my weight just like pulled my shoulder out of its socket.
Ooh,
And then I was
Bummer.
like, take, 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 take. And then as soon as I like I was pretty horizontal from the bolt, so Michelle took, and then I let go, and I took a big pendulum, and as soon as I fell, my shoulder popped back in. So
Wow,
like
that's
it was a
lucky.
subluxation. Yeah. And then we were like high enough up where we couldn't really bail with one rope, so we like chilled out for a bit. There were two guys who were in front of us who were like super kind and like helped me get up the pitch, and there are two doctors like at two pitches above us, um and Michelle's like was like maybe the most one of the most senior members on Yosemite Search and Rescue. I was with like the best people I could have been
Yeah.
with.
It's like
And yeah, we decided to bail up because I was like, oh, I could probably just Jumar, and Michelle just took over and led like most of the notes, which was really cool. Um,
wow.
and we still did it in like I don't know 9 hours or something. Um, and
s-
yeah, so I that's how I subluxed it, and then I actually ended up I like rested for 3 weeks, and then I climbed the Yosemite Triple Crown. Um, and then it was like unstable the whole time though, and then I just like kept going to the gym and almost dislocating it, and then eventually was and then I fully dislocated it climbing on a kilter board.
Ooh.
And then I got an MRI, and they're like, yeah, for sure surgery. So I've been recovering from that. I'm still not recovered. It's actually been a super frustrating
Mm.
um, recovery experience. It's been very, very slow. I have not been able to climb at my limit. And it's been, I don't know, I guess, yeah, like over 6 months now.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, my future is essentially just working really hard through December. Probably trying to get in some some weekend warrior missions to Yosemite, assuming my shoulder is like doing well, and then I'll go down to Patagonia for 3 months. Um, and I have a bunch of different things I'm stoked to try. Would really like to climb Cerro Torre, and would like to climb a bunch of other big mountains there. And um, yeah, super excited for that. And then I'll come back up and probably start a life of, working or climbing and climbing a little bit. But yeah, Patagonia is the main thing. It's like the big trip on my horizon. Um, and kind of just like, yeah, ready to indulge after all this work.
Nice. It's awesome, man.
I like how you just casually threw Cerro Torre in there like it was a hill.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like
nice hike. Nice hike for the day.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the big thing I haven't climbed down.
Are you
there.
ready for the rime ice at the top?
No, definitely not. But luckily, I have a partner that's like really dialed on the rime ice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have to get those like shovel head attachments for your ice axis.
Yeah, well,
right?
it actually depends what route you go up. I like there's a few different ways you can go up the mountain, but if you climb the southeast ridge, which is like formerly the compressor route, the famous route that Caesar Maestri bolted his way up, you actually can access the summit without climbing the rime with like the shovel things. But the
Okay,
classic
cool.
west face route, the Ragni route, um, which is like the first true time that mountain has ever been climbed, that is essentially a fully an ice climb. And I think it's mostly relatively moderate until there's a few hard pitches, and then that last rime pitch is like super gnarly for the first person that goes up at the start of the year or whatever, or the start of like that storm. But then as soon as the first person climbs it, apparently it like chills out and isn't as like this, whoever's climbing it second and third or whatever is like it's way chiller. I've never climbed it, so I don't really know. I'm just kind of spewing what I've heard.
And Hayden Kennedy chopped all the bolts on the compressor out, right?
Not all of them, no.
Just enough to free it?
No, so I would recommend for people interested in this subject, I'd highly recommend people reading the book called The Tower by Kelly Cordes. It's a incredible book that documents the full history of Cerro Torre. That's like definitely the best resource to like get the full story. It's really fascinating, but the short summary is that Hayden Kennedy and Jason Kruk, they didn't free climb the southeast ridge, but they climbed it by fair means, meaning that they did not pull on any of the bolts for upward progress as they climbed that ridge. However, they did use some of them for protection, and they used them to rappel. But essentially, what happened was the dude took an air compressor and drilled a bolt every like, I don't know, 3 to 5 feet. I'm not sure the distance. I haven't actually been up there, but yeah, it was kind of like a catastrophe to some degree, and people were just like, you could just like via fraud your way up the mountain, and that's like a bit of a shame, in my opinion. So yeah, those two dudes chopped many of the bolts on the route, not all of them, and made it impossible to via fraud your way up the route. You actually had to use your hands and feet to go climb it, and I think it's seen 2 free ascents ever, like David Lama and Peter like Oitner or something like that. They free climbed it, and then Josh Wharton, Mikey Schaefer, and one other dude, I forget his name, they have free climbed it as well, and that'd be a really cool dream. But yeah, I think just climbing it by fair means would be pretty rad.
Sick. That's
sick, man.
Crazy.
That's awesome.
Crazy objective.
Yeah, it'll be cool. I mean, hopefully that happens. I don't know. It's like you go down there, and I've gone down there a couple times, and every time I've gone down there, I've had like an idea of what I want to do, and I've never actually really done exactly what I want to do. It's everything gets changed and modified, and
aim high, right?
Yeah, sure, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, nice, dude. You want to kind of like close this out with like, if you have a message towards your, I don't know, you're call them your fans or your the audience, the people that love you, the people that support you. Like, do you have anything to say to them or about climbing or in general?
I guess I would just say stay psyched. That's like the most important thing. A lot of people are like, also actually, maybe this is a little bit of a dive I'll do, but a lot of people are always like, oh, like how do you get really strong at climbing and do these big objectives? Like I'm going to go to the gym and train really hard, and that's how I'm going to get to that's how I'm going to get strong enough to climb El Cap. And I would argue that the best way to get better at climbing is to be really friggin' psyched. And if you're really friggin' psyched, you will get like, if that psych is authentic, the motivation to go push your limits and climb outside and do these things or train in the gym or whatever, like it's heightened to the degree in which you can suddenly push yourself to a place where you previously didn't think you would ever be. And I really think that having high psych levels, that's so key to life, but also to climbing specifically. So yeah, that would be my message to people. Just stay psyched and keep stoke high, and yeah, share psych and share stoke.